At times, it can bring the whole planet to a standstill. This simplest of games that can be played anywhere fuels the dreams and aspirations of children everywhere. It's about local pride and national identity. Its chief protagonists are amongst the most revered and famous people on the planet. The 2002 FIFA World Cup finals reached a cumulative TV audience of more than 28 billion viewers in 213 countries. Football is without doubt the greatest sport there's ever been.
It is a school of life. It is a school of life based on individual discipline, on respect to the others, teammates, opponent, to the referee. It is a fighting game with a fighting spirit, but a good spirit. You are always in a group. You learn to lose, very important. You learn to win, that's easy. And you are never alone. And this game provokes a lot of hope. A hope not only to become a better footballer, but to become a better human being.
FIFA House in Zurich. This is the headquarters of the football world. From here, the beautiful game at every level is overseen. The current president, Joseph S. Blatter, was elected in 1998.
We have 204 national associations, more members than the United Nations, and we have 250 million adepts of our game active, about 30 million girls and women, about them, but with all their families and all together, it's more than 1 billion people in the world is now affected by this virus. But it's a positive virus. Positive virus is football, and football can bring people together.
The year 2004 marks the 100th birthday of FIFA. For a century, FIFA's been the historical epicenter for the global spread of the modern game. In Europe, there's been plenty of mob football played throughout history, some vaguely resembling the game that we know and love today. This is Florence in Italy, where they still play something called calcio storico. All right, it's not directly related to modern football. It's 27-a-side for a start, and the ball can be something of an afterthought. Games like this were immensely popular throughout Europe, though they varied from country to country. The sort of football that began to develop in England was different. Like calcio storico, it was grounded in local pastimes, but though physical, it was certainly less dangerous than the violent mob games. In the late 19th century, as the English style of football spread around the world, it found fertile ground in mainland Europe. From the 1880s onwards, clubs started to develop, along with regional and national associations. By 1900, there were internationals and club matches across Europe. And while the British associations accepted that other nations enjoyed this sport, they weren't especially interested in helping out. So what was the next step? Well, if the Europeans wanted to set up a framework for international relations, it was clear they'd have to do it themselves. So Robert Guérin, president of the French Football Association, invited representatives from across Europe to 229 Rue Saint-Honoré in Paris on May the 21st, 1904. Today it's a shoe shop, but this was the birthplace of one of the most influential bodies in world sport. 7 nations were there. A club side represented Spain, Madrid FC, who've since become Real Madrid. The establishment of FIFA provided national associations and their constituent clubs with an international framework. Within a year, 15 nations were represented across Europe, including the British. This programme will follow the path of football's development across the globe at international and club level. The First World War severely held back the development of the game. Though such was the popularity of football, international matches were still played between the European powers on neutral territory. By the end of the war, football was still the #1 sport in all of FIFA's original member countries. With the war over, the nations of Europe and South America began to challenge Britain's domination of the game. South America had already laid down the gauntlet, with Uruguay winning Olympic football titles in 1924 and 28, and the first FIFA World Cup in 1930, a tournament they hosted themselves. The first serious challenge to emerge within continental Europe was from Austria. After the war, the Austrian national team manager, Hugo Meisel, and his English coach, Jimmy Hogan, formed an unlikely alliance. Together, these two like-minded gentlemen created a football team that could take on the world. Step forth, the Wunder team. Although they suffered a narrow 4-3 defeat against England at Stamford Bridge in 1929, in a game they should have won, the Wunder team dominated in the late 20s and early 30s. Impressive victories over Hungary, Germany and Italy meant Austria under Meisel had something of a monopoly on European football's bragging rights for over a decade. But all that was soon to change. From his base in Turin, northern Italy, a good friend of Meisel's was waiting for his own team's chance to shine. Vittorio Pozzo was Italy's national coach for over a decade. Pozzo was a keen student of the game who learnt his trade in England, and an imposing father figure to players like the late Angelo Schiavio.
I have great memories of Vittorio Pozzo. Apart from being a great coach, he was also a wonderful human being. He always tried to encourage his players, especially during difficult moments. I can't say enough about him.
When Italy staged the 1934 FIFA World Cup, the hosts finally usurped Austria as mainland Europe's top nation, beating them 1-0 in the semi-final. In the final, Pozzo's men met another strong nation from Central Europe, Czechoslovakia, in front of Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. Italy were the firm favourites, which was just as well, as Il Duce had indicated strongly how important the victory was to him. The Czechs took the lead, but couldn't hold on. Goals from Orsi and an extra-time strike from Schiavio saw Pozzo's side emerge 2-1 victors. For the first time, the Europeans had made a big impact on the FIFA World Cup. Italy had to defend their title 4 years later in France. The Wunder team had raised European football to new levels, but had failed to win the ultimate prize. The Italians, on the other hand, had already done it once, and after making it to the 1938 FIFA World Cup final, Pozzo's men were on the verge of doing it again. They took on Hungary in the Stade Cologne, Paris. It would prove to be Pozzo's, and at that time Calcio's, finest hour. Although there are only 2 survivors from the side that won the tournament in 1934, they still managed a convincing 4-2 victory. Pozzo remains the only coach in history to lead his side to 2 consecutive FIFA World Cups. It was the high point of Pozzo's tenure as coach. Sadly, the Second World War intervened, and his side, still to reach its prime, were unable to shine on the big stage again. Then, as the clouds of war lifted, there came another tragedy. Italian champions Torino were widely regarded as the best club side in Europe. On May the 4th, 1949, Il Grande Torino were on their way back from Lisbon after a friendly match with Benfica when their plane crashed in fog into the Superga Basilica on the outskirts of Turin. All on board were killed, including the backbone of the Italian national side. The whole country was sent into mourning. The death toll included captain Valentino Mazzola. His son Sandro also went on to represent his country 70 times, becoming one of Italy's finest players.
My father used to take me to play football with him. He actually said I would become a footballer, but I would find that out later in life. He said even from a very young age I had the potential. My passion for the game definitely came from him. My mother, on the other hand, didn't want me to become a footballer because she didn't want to lose her son in the way she had lost her husband. But I managed to convince her, and she let me get on with what I wanted to do.
The void left by the Superga tragedy was to be filled by a new generation of European heroes. In November 1953, England met Hungary at Wembley. England had never been beaten at home by continental opposition, and despite Hungary's growing reputation, no one thought that would change. But change it did, with a vengeance. The Hungarians hammered England 6-3. Overnight, the names of players such as Ferenc Puskás and the late Nandor Hidegkuti became every bit as well known as the likes of England's Stanley Matthews.
We didn't realize straight away. It was only in the next few days that it sank in. We went to see a football match in Paris, where the French fans gave us a standing ovation and asked us to walk out onto the pitch. Later we went to Vienna, and the mayor invited us to dinner. Only after that did we realize what a great result it was against England.
6 months later, at the NEP Stadium in Budapest, the sides would meet again.
You see, to beat an England team is always very important. If it were possible, we could have sold 500,000 tickets, so many people wanted to get into the stadium. You could sell a ticket for at least 10 times its face value. Some people were even offering their prize pigs for a ticket. That's how big this game was.
This time it finished 7-1 to Hungary. The side dubbed the Mighty Magyars were already Olympic champions, and under coach Gustav Sebesh played a new brand of quick-passing football that was taking everyone by surprise. After 1945, the new communist regime abolished what was a strong professional league in Hungary, but they made sure their top players were as well looked after as their Western European counterparts. Army Major Ferenc Puskás, for example, wasn't expected to keep his rifle clean, just his fancy car. After destroying England, they entered the 1954 FIFA World Cup in Switzerland with the absolute belief that they were champions-elect. And the Hungarians started like champions, 9-0 against South Korea, 8-3 against the Germans. Then it was Brazil in the quarters. Hungary emerged 4-2 victors. Next up, reigning champions Uruguay, who'd never been beaten in a FIFA World Cup match. It went into extra time and finished 4-2 to the Magyars. Hungary had made it to the final. It was a great match, but another physically draining encounter. They now faced West Germany, captained by the great Fritz Walter. Despite being serious underdogs, Walter and co. were seemingly fresher and more relaxed after a much easier passage to the final.
At the beginning, we thought there was no chance of beating Hungary, mainly because of the 8-3 defeat. But we also knew that we had been improving from game to game. So when it came to the final, we thought maybe there was a slight possibility of beating the Hungarians.
Still no one, except the most optimistic of Germans, believed that Hungary could possibly be taken. But those previous matches had taken their toll. Despite the Hungarians taking a 2-0 lead, Germany emerged, shock 3-2 victors. It was Hungary's first defeat in 6 years. The mighty Magyars were never destined to lift the FIFA World Cup. 2 years later, Soviet tanks rolled into Budapest and many of the team defected. Most famously Puskás, who moved to Real Madrid and became a naturalized Spaniard. With the subsequent changes in political climate, the class of '54 were able to return to their beloved Hungary and talk proudly about their achievements. Not only did they make a huge impact on international football, but many like Puskás, who played for crack Budapest side Honvéd, were indirectly responsible for the creation of club football's biggest competition. The extraordinary story began in 1954 when Honvéd travelled to England to play Wolverhampton Wanderers. The English press, still smarting from Hungary's win at Wembley, saw Wolves' 3-2 victory as revenge. Wolves had already beaten Spartak Moscow 4-0, and English journalists, never once to shy away from hyperbole, claimed for them the mantle of world champions. Meanwhile in Paris, writers at the sports newspaper L'Équipe and sister magazine France Football had their own views on how to decide which was the best team on earth. And they were determined to do something about it.
Journalists at L'Équipe said yes, Wolverhampton are a good team, but they need to face the likes of Milan and Real Madrid and other big clubs, and then they can say that they are the club world champions. So the thinking was, why not stage a big competition with the best clubs? That's how the European Cup started. The idea was put to journalists at L'Équipe to lobby for a competition to UEFA, who at that time were a very young organisation.
So in 1955, the first European Cup proper began. The highly active associations in Central Europe, though, had been one step ahead of the game. A hugely important tournament, the Mitropa Cup, began in 1927, featuring Austrian, Czech, Hungarian and Italian clubs. Now it was time to go a stage further and find a champion club for the whole of Europe. One team rapidly became synonymous with European Cup success. It was neither Honvéd nor Wolves. Real Madrid are not only the biggest club in Spain, they're arguably the biggest in the world. 9 times they've been European champions, and their museum contains probably the largest collection of silverware on the planet.
Everyone realises, the tradition of Real Madrid, but this is a club that is one of the biggest clubs in the world, and for me to be part of that and to wear the Real Madrid kit, now it means the world to me.
The team of the 50s was almost as revered as the superstars of today. For Beckham, read the great Di Stefano. For Zidane, read Puskás. The Spanish side dominated the European Champions Cup, winning the first 5 tournaments. Real's finest hour came on an unforgettable evening in Glasgow in 1960. They beat German side Eintracht Frankfurt 7-3 in a game which was arguably the greatest European final of all time. Real Madrid's Pachin, who played in the game, still can't believe it.
I remember they went 1 up, and then after that it was like a festival. Puskás scored 4 goals and 3 for Alfredo Di Stefano. It was like an exhibition. The ball was out of play for a very small amount of time during the game. Sometimes I watch it on the television, and I'm still amazed at how long the ball is in play during the game.
So Europe had their champions, but the South Americans were not just going to sit by and let Madrid be crowned the best club in the world. The Copa Libertadores, instigated in 1960, would provide their challenger to find the world's best club. The Copa champions were Peñarol, a side from a suburb of Montevideo, Uruguay. The team, formed in 1891, some 11 years before Real Madrid, by English railway workers, had risen to become one of South America's strongest club sides. It started well enough for the South Americans with a draw in Uruguay, but a crunching 5-1 defeat in Madrid confirmed what many had suspected: Real could beat anyone. For Perhaps one reason for their success was that they were not afraid to search far and wide for talent. Real became one of the first big clubs to make major signings from abroad. Ferenc Puskás, of course, who'd been with the mighty Magyars, but perhaps their greatest star came from Argentina. Alfredo Di Stefano had travelled to Spain from his homeland via Colombia. He spent an unconvincing season with Barcelona before joining Real Madrid. 5 European Cups speaks volumes for what he meant to them. Di Stefano, like Puskás, became a naturalised Spaniard, but the man who'd take Alfredo's mantle as South America's finest never plied his trade in Europe. Santos, a port city just south of Sao Paulo, is home to the club where Brazil's finest ever player spent most of his career. Pelé was known and adored internationally for his exploits in 3 of Brazil's FIFA World Cup winning sides. But during his career at Santos, the club he joined as a schoolboy, he won 11 Sao Paulo state championships, 2 Copa Libertadores, and 2 World Club Championships, scoring over 1,000 goals along the way. A prodigious and, by today's standards, a remarkably loyal club career.
I always thought that football was one of the biggest spectacles of all time. It's the only game where you can't be idle. You can't look at the crowd, because there's always something happening. One jumps, the other falls, the other spins, another dances, one dribbles. So it's like a ballet. A ballet is a beautiful thing. This is why I said football is the beautiful game. Everywhere in the world, people communicate through football. It's the only game which people play all over the world. So I don't have any doubt that it is a beautiful game, a wonderful game.
With the help of sporting ambassadors like Pelé, the profile of club football everywhere was getting higher and higher. Welcome to Cairo. The 2 giants of Egyptian football, Zamalek and Al Ahly, meet here in one of the top fixtures in the Arab world. Soweto in South Africa. It doesn't get much bigger than when Kaizer Chiefs take on Orlando Pirates. In Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf, many of the biggest clubs have invested heavily in foreign and homegrown talent. Clubs like Al Hilal have found this to be a recipe for success at home and across Asia. In Japan, the J-League has introduced colour, excitement and spectacle to the domestic scene, and the strength of the clubs has been reflected in the national team's success, not least in the 2002 FIFA World Cup, where their performances captured the imagination of the world. Mexico's Cruz Azul are one of CONCACAF's best sides. They now regularly compete in the Copa Libertadores with great success. Club football is as big as it has ever been. At the highest level, it has developed into a thriving business. The top clubs enjoy worldwide support and can generate large amounts of money. It's a phenomenon that FIFA themselves are happy to embrace.
We need the big clubs again because the World Cup, we cannot play it every year. We play it every 4 years. So in the meantime, we must have something to activate the promotional part of football.
In 2000, FIFA decided to recognize this expansion in the club game. Brazil was the venue for the first FIFA Club World Championship. 8 teams from all 6 of the world's football confederations were vying to become the first winners of this tournament. It was an all-Brazil final, with Sao Paulo club Corinthians beating Vasco da Gama from Rio. Plans are now afoot to stage the second tournament in 2005. FIFA has certainly come a long way from 229 Rue Saint-Honoré in Paris.